2008, I was a TV news journalist who was forced to take a 2-week-long furlough, basically no pay for 2 weeks because my company was hit pretty hard, like many companies, by a decline in advertising revenue. Fast forward now 12 years later, we're facing a global pandemic and newsrooms are saying the same thing: furloughs, layoffs, even shutting down altogether, and they're blaming this virus. But is the virus really to blame, or have newsrooms been in decline for a decade?
We are in Clearwater tonight. I'm Allison Morrow.
Hi, I'm Allison Morrow.
I'm Allison Morrow.
And I've gone to a lot of places.
On St. Pete Beach, Allison Morrow.
And now with my former Force Recon Marine husband, I'm going off-grid-ish.
As this pandemic continues to grip a lot of people's attention, I think it's really important to continue to keep an eye on any industry that has a lot of power, whether that's power of information or power of finances or power of regulation, so government or press or Wall Street or whatever else it is. And so that's why I continue to do these videos on media analysis. Now, if you've been paying attention, you've seen obviously millions of Americans are filing for unemployment across all sectors of the economy. And we're also now hearing that the newsrooms who are covering the pandemic and also the economic consequences of the shutdowns and the social isolation and the businesses closing and everything are also saying that they're suffering from a decrease in ad revenue. And this makes a lot of sense. Obviously, if businesses can't pay their employees, they can't stay open, they're not making any money, they're not going to advertise. And that was the case in 2008 when the housing market crashed and I was a reporter. I had actually almost just started my career. I had been in the business for about a year at that point in time. And I was asked to take a 2-week furlough. It wasn't really asked. It was like I didn't have much of a choice. A 2-week unpaid furlough. So let's take a look at this first article, which is one of the many headlines I found about this. It basically says, coronavirus presents existential threat for news media. This is by Axios. And essentially says, coronavirus is forcing major media giants to leverage layoffs and pay cuts in order to survive the coronavirus pandemic. Why it matters. In the first few weeks of the outbreak in the U.S., local outlets were sounding the alarm over lost advertising revenue from shuttered local business. As the crisis continues, big national media companies say they are bracing for the worst. So it goes through a list of companies that have announced layoffs and salary cuts and cuts to benefits. But check out this article from Bloomberg. It says journalism job cuts haven't been this bad since the recession. And maybe your first thought is, oh man, because of the coronavirus? But no, actually this was printed July 1st, 2019. So almost a year ago, they're saying journalism job cuts have not been this bad since the recession. And it says the news business is on pace for its worst job losses in a decade, as about 3,000 people have been laid off or been offered buyouts in the first 5 months of the year. Newspapers owned by Gannett and McClatchy, digital media companies like BuzzFeed and Vice Media, and the cable news channel CNN have all shed employees. The level of attrition is the highest since 2009, when the industry saw 7,914 job cuts in the first 5 months of that year in the wake of the financial crisis, according to data compiled by Challenger Gray and Christmas Inc., an outplacement and executive coaching firm. Interestingly enough, this article says that at that time in 2019, when it was published, the U.S. unemployment rate was the lowest it had been since 1969, but that the journalism sphere was one of the rare weak spots. Check this out. It says, in most industries, employers can't find enough people to fill the jobs they have open, he said. In news, it has been the opposite story, and it seems to have been accelerating. Take a look at this post by the Pew Research Center. It's dated July 9th, 2019, entitled, U.S. Newsroom Employment Has Dropped by a Quarter Since 2008, with Greatest Decline at Newspapers. You can scroll down and kind of see the graph they have here. It says from 2008 to 2018, newsroom employment in the U.S. dropped by 25%. In 2008, about 114,000 newsroom employees worked in 5 industries that produce news: newspaper, radio, broadcast television, cable, and other information services. By 2018, that number had declined to about 86,000, a loss of about 28,000 jobs. It says this decline in overall newsroom employment has been driven primarily by one sector: newspapers. The number of newsroom employees dropped by 47% between 2008 and 2018, from about 71,000 workers to 38,000 total. So of the 5 industries, the only notable growth was the digital news sector. Since 2008, the number of digital native newsroom employees has increased by 82%, from about 7,400 workers to about 13,500 in 2018. This increase of about 6,100 total jobs, however, fell far short of offsetting the loss of about 33,000 newspaper newsroom jobs during the same period. The coronavirus is just an acute issue that's being dealt with right now that may have been the straw that broke the camel's back, but news industry has been dealing with this issue of viewership, subscribers, how to keep up with digital media for a long time. And there are a few different reasons why, depending on who you're reading. Right now, what's happening is actually the big tech companies are donating lots of money to journalism nonprofits or for grants for media organizations to apply for because they feel bad. Basically, they've gotten a lot of blame for where the media industry is at this point. It was very clear back when I was a TV news reporter in 2008 during the recession that we were going to have to make some major changes to keep up with the economic issues that we were facing, but also with the increase of the market going toward the digital sphere. And the newspapers sort of got a head start on that because they were hit the hardest back then. And TV stations were still able to kind of ride it out because people were still turning on their TV sets, whereas fewer and fewer people were buying an actual print newspaper, like the actual paper product, which is how newspapers made the majority of their money. In fact, I was just meeting with a local newspaper here in our area that said they don't really invest a lot in digital even yet because they feel like they're still making the majority of their money from the print publication. Now, whether they're going to be able to continue that into the next 5 to 10, 15 years, if they don't start to invest any money in it, I question. But even still, that's how much that actual print paper means to these publications. This article from the New York Times is titled "The Evening News is Back," and this opening graph here says the network newscast had lost relevance thanks to cable and digital media. Now the coronavirus has put tens of millions of viewers back in the 6:30 p.m. habit. People are watching the nightly news now, which is often called appointment television. Basically, you make an appointment and you stick to it. Like you go to your doctor, it's scheduled for 2:30 in the afternoon. You can't just stream your doctor at 5:30 because it's more convenient for you. You have to show up. And appointment television has been what's kind of been going on the decline because why would you sit down and watch the 6:30 news when you could watch updates of exactly what you want in little pieces whenever you want at a time that's convenient for you? You see, ABC's World News Tonight and the NBC Nightly News had an average of about 12 million viewers for their newscast last week. Among the biggest totals for all network shows, according to Nielsen, that's roughly the same as the average for Monday Night Football. That said, if there are a lot of people watching, but no one can afford to pay for advertising revenue, then it doesn't really matter, right? It's that whole saying, like, if a tree falls in the woods, but no one's there to hear it, did it really make a sound? And we'll see how television stations do with all of this. I think that they're far more reliant on car advertising sales, actually. Like, car sales are a huge portion of how TV stations make their money in ad revenue. And I have a couple friends who work in car sales and they've all been told to stay home. So I don't know where that goes, but I can't imagine that TV stations are going to walk out of this unscathed. But it may not just be the existence of social media companies, but actually where Americans put their trust now that is causing part of this issue. Because take a look, this is an article from The Hill back in January, which quotes a study that Americans trust Amazon and Google more than the US government and the news media. And the study was basically done by Morning Consult. They're saying it's the digital media and research company's largest survey of its kind ever conducted, covering approximately 2,000 brands with an average of 16,700 interviews focused on each company. And the survey posed the question, how much do you trust each brand to do what is right? Respondents had the option to respond a lot, some, not much, not at all, or don't know. Overall, interestingly, they found that the U.S. Postal Service is the most trusted of all brands, with 42% saying they trust the government-run service a lot to do the right thing. Then USPS is followed by Amazon at 38.8%, Google at 37.9%, and PayPal at 36.5%. Other brands like Chick-fil-A, Netflix, Heinz, and Walmart receive more than 30%. But if you scroll down here, you see, meanwhile, just 8% of respondents said they put a lot of trust in the U.S. news media to do the right thing, while 7% said the same of the U.S. government, and 5% said the same of Wall Street. And this is where I get a little frustrated when I talk to some of my friends who are still in the industry, especially like people pointing fingers at me when I left, because there is still this sense of being kind of like the martyrs for truth that the public needs to survive, without realizing that there is a huge portion of the public that has a very grave distrust in the profession of journalism right now, and in some cases for very good reason. And unfortunately, journalists in a lot of cases are not willing to take responsibility for the failures of the profession at this point. And I think that continues to drive and aggravate the distrust of the public, which is why I have tried to be a little bit more open and listen to people about their concerns and talk to them, whether they're right or wrong. Some people have these crazy conspiracy theories about what happens in the newsroom, how we choose topics, and how we cover things. And I'm talking specifically about local news right now, because that is my specialty. I spent a year working in national news, and I will say they are totally two different beasts. If you want the best, closest to your community kind of journalism, definitely get to know your local TV stations or your local paper and the reporters there, and follow reporters that you trust. You don't have to follow brands. I never follow brands. I follow individuals that have proven a track record of being able to, pull their opinions and bias from the establishment perspective and be more critical thinking of the masses and not afraid of what I call the mobocracy. So they have hard conversations and talk about logic and facts, and not just follow sort of like the emotional canning of ideas because one or another topic is untouchable. The real journalists, the ones that are not creating all kinds of antagonism and mob fury on the social media platforms, taking some kind of, advocacy role where they're touting their ability to be the nanny for the American people and pointing fingers at this person and pointing fingers at that person and making everybody all angry at each other, because they don't have time. The real journalists do not have time for that, because they are in their offices late at night when everyone else has left with the lights off. They're calling their sources. They're reading through thousands of pages of public records requests. They're putting their own lives at risk in some cases for no glory. And so I do feel terrible for that, because those people are vital to our ability to continue practicing the great democracy opportunity we have here in this country. It does rely on people like them. And there is a huge difference between that and, unfortunately, a lot of what claims to be journalism in today's world. Part of the problem, if not a huge part of the problem, is not just the rise of digital media. It's not just that you have Google and YouTube and all these other platforms that they exist themselves and they're all competing for the same pie, but that people are starting to trust those organizations more than the mainstream news. Should they? That's a great question, because I have several videos on my channel talking about how the big tech companies are censoring a ton. I've had coronavirus videos that have been censored. I've had other friends who have had just ridiculously stupid videos that have been demonetized. You've had big YouTubers or people who have a huge following on social media that say something that the media these platforms have decided are just kind of untouchable conversations, and they just smoke them, their entire accounts, from the ethos. Like, it just doesn't even exist anymore. They get rid of their, they all can conspire, I guess, get rid of you all at the same time. You can just cease to exist on social media. And now that that's a platform, the town square that everyone uses to communicate, it's literally like having your ability to speak out to the rest of the world, like your freedom of speech, completely removed. Now, this is a conversation for another video about whether these big tech companies should have the protections that they do as a platform, where it's like, oh no, we're just a platform where anyone can post whatever, when they're really acting like publishers because they're censoring too. So should Americans trust Google in a way that they do not trust CBS or ABC or Fox or any of the other cable or network news stations. I think there's good reason to have distrust of all of those categories and to be very, very savvy as a media consumer in today's environment, because honestly, the censorship train has left the station, and it is not just stopping at certain depots, it's stopping at every single one of them. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon for notifications when I upload new videos, and share this with people you think might be interested. There's a lot of shadow banning and censorship that also happens in the digital sphere, especially on YouTube, and so it really helps creators like myself get our material out there when our audiences share it with their own audiences as well. Again, I'm Allison Morrow, and I will see you next time.